As markets move on-chain, TradFi and crypto markets are converging on Canton, the world's biggest institutions, highest quality assets, and on-chain innovators already here, the first public blockchain network with privacy. Every 2 weeks, we'll showcase the applications and use cases shaping the future of finance. The ecosystem is growing, new markets are forming, and this is just the beginning. Welcome to the Canton Buildcast, where new connections create new possibilities. This week, Jonathan, IntellectEU, shows us how easy it is to spin up and manage enterprise-grade validators on Canton so you can participate in apps, continuously earn token rewards. There's more to build and connections to be made, so come and find your place on Canton. Let's go.
Hi, Jonathan. Fantastic to see you again. Thanks for joining us.
Thank you, Ben. Thanks for having us.
So, at IntellectEU, you've been really helping institutions and crypto-native firms operate enterprise-grade blockchain infrastructure really since, 2014, 2015, right?
Yeah, it's been a decade almost.
Wow. Okay. And something we're really seeing happening at pace now is that in the Canton ecosystem, especially node distribution is becoming really much more important. You know, in the Canton context, that really means institutions that are using applications on the network wanting to gain the full benefits of the sovereignty and the privacy that Canton provides by spinning up a validator node. And obviously in Canton, that's a bit different because, validators and other chains are not quite the same, right? And on Canton, your node is really your own private slice of the global ledger. It's what keeps you in real-time sync with all the other participants in the network across all the applications you use. So, we're really seeing people now wanting to run a validator so they can bring that computing power and utility to the network overall. And there's obviously incentives for doing that as well now, because we have obviously rewards with Canton Coin for people that are contributing to that infrastructure as well. So really, really cool to be on this journey with you. You're obviously helping a lot of our customers to get started with that. It'll be really good, Jonathan, to kind of get your view as we start off here on how you've really seen the kind of evolution of this institutional grade blockchain infrastructure. We used to call it enterprise blockchain. I think it's very much evolved from that now. What are the different approaches that you've seen at IEU to network building, to application building, and how these approaches have maybe changed the kind of the speed and scale of network adoption that we're now seeing and the utility that app users can access in networks?
Yeah, exactly. And it's a bit like you mentioned, right? Like the focus is really on the utility of the network and what is the value that the technology can bring. And that's something we've seen over the past 10 years as well. It's where really the focus has been shifting on what is the value that the technology can bring, being that immutable orchestration layer that it can provide for those different types of business applications. And that really is also the focus with those different networks and these applications. So one thing that I think the Canton network has done great is it focused first on proving the value of the technology with the form of creating those different applications, being it in the form of those private domains or those subnets, and then focusing on, okay, how do we now create a global synchronizer or a global network out of that? And that we've seen really drives the growth and acceleration of the network, given that there's already proven value on there. There's large entities and like 10 largest banks are involved in Canton network. And we see that really it's because of the focus on the utility and the business value that really accelerates the adoption.
Yeah, fantastic. And I think that idea of accelerating adoption for institutions of all kinds is really the core of what you guys have been doing from the beginning. Tell us obviously what Catalyst Blockchain Manager is, what it's designed to solve, who in the Canton ecosystem, what kinds of firms are you working with in the ecosystem already?
Yeah, and it's neat, like you mentioned, like with IntellectEU, we've been focused on emerging technologies, implementing that for regulated entities for the past 10 years now. And what we've seen is that in that whole journey from concept to production, there's a lot of recurring lessons learned, mistakes, risks that need to be addressed. So really the goal with Catalyst is how do we accelerate that journey and automate as much as possible to reduce the risks of going from concept to production. And that's also what we've seen with like the 3 largest FMIs, that the latest papers they brought out, like the Euroclear, Clearstream, DTCC, is really the focus on what is the principles that need to be addressed, what are the enterprise-grade requirements that are needed. And then 3 things that really stood out that we want to address with Catalyst is the infrastructure management, the operational resiliency and enterprise readiness that's needed, but also the integration piece, being an integration to legacy systems, different settlement and payment rails. So what we aim to do with Catalyst is really how do we address those 3 pieces, being the infrastructure management, providing you that assurance and that resiliency that's needed during runtime, and the integration to really accelerate the evolution of global markets that way and allow those institutions to leverage the technology and the benefits that it can bring.
Yeah, great. And I think the other thing that we're really seeing, it's not just the institutional side coming to these institutional grade blockchains now, we're really seeing this dissolution of the boundaries between kind of institutional adoption and the crypto side, and people wanting to get all the benefits of the crypto rails. So you're working with other people now in the Canton ecosystem, right? Not just the institutional, like big players. You mentioned the FMIs and things. It's also, the validators coming in. So how does that work when you're bringing those different kinds of players together, bring them together on Canton?
Yeah, it's exactly like you mentioned. Like, it's the whole ecosystem that is starting to come together and see how their different business drivers and needs and values can collaborate. So I think right now at Catalyst, we're not only serving banks, but it goes beyond, like, to wealth managers, trading firms, stablecoin providers, market makers, and even custody providers. So we see across really that whole sphere that those entities are bringing their business value on the network and really looking how to collaborate. And we see really that drives the adoption of business value, gives direct benefits to the end consumer as well. So it's really exciting to see how it's growing.
Exactly. Thanks, Jonathan. So let's talk more show. Let's have a look at the blockchain manager in action. Do you have a demo you can show us, maybe to walk us through some of the key use cases you're working with some of those different participants on?
Yeah, certainly happy to showcase, Ben. So as you mentioned with Catalyst, we really want that to be a tool or an interface for entities to use to go from concept to production and provide them the infrastructure requirements, the operational resiliency and management capabilities to really scale and focus on what is the business requirements. So in Catalyst, if you log into the interface, you can see here different Canton components. You immediately get a good overview of what's happening on the network. So what I want to showcase in this demo is how easy it is to set up a local domain, being it one of the subnets, how to deploy a participant on the network and deploy different applications. And then you can even go to the validator section to connect to the global synchronizer. So we'll call this domain the Buildcast domain, where we here will be able to select the image that we're going to use. We can select different functionality. If you want to expose it to the outside world, for example, you can give in all the necessary configurations that needed, or we can just go with the default and hit create. And then our domain will be being set up in the background. So Catalyst does consist of a user interface, an API console, and what we call a DLT operator. So here we're showcasing our user interface, but everything we're showcasing here is perfectly available to do via our API. So you can see here the Buildcast domain is up since 11 seconds right now. We can see the logs that are happening right away, which could also be integrated with existing systems, and we can see the necessary variables. Now, for the participants, it's a similar process. So we'll call this one the Buildcast participant. Similar setup. You can select your own image or the one that is publicly available. We can select to run Canton Enterprise and select all the other resource configurations that are needed. You can connect it to your own IDP or authentication mechanism. You can do all necessary configurations, or indeed, like the last time, just go with the default setup. As you see here in the background, then the different components will automatically be created. And then we leverage our DLT operator that we've built to provide that control loop. So to really make sure that what you have deployed has that resiliency, has that uptime available, and gives you that assurance with the application that you are running that it is consistent. And it's so next step, we will to connect it to a domain. So we can here connect it to the Buildcast domain. Catalyst does allow you to connect to a custom domain as well. And it's really as easy as hitting a few steps. And then you can see that this participant then joined the Buildcast domain. There currently, because it's a fresh domain, no new existing parties on the network. So we can create a party called Ben, which is then here created. And I can even create one for Jonathan. Now, these are then the parties that will be represented on this participant node and can be interacted with on smart contracts on the network. If you will then want to connect that to an off-ledger user in our IDP systems, we can again just say, okay, this Ben user is connected to this party and can act as the participant Ben, and then we can create that linkage there as well. And you can see here with Catalyst, we can do necessary operations then that are needed during runtime. You can see the logs that are needed. If you then want to install the DAR file, it's as easy as selecting one of the existing DARs that have been uploaded into our collections tab before. So all of that really functions smooth and makes it very easy to really focus on what is the business value that we want to create, and abstracts away all the hurdles that are needed during runtime.
That's great, Jonathan. So let me just clarify. So what you've seen there is initially you're spinning up participant nodes, and this is what we've historically talked about in terms of connecting to private subnets or applications that are really running these private networks in the past. And what we're going to see next is you connecting really those participant nodes to the global synchronizer, right? So this then is all about taking part in that public ecosystem. And also what we've seen there, you mentioned DARs. These are the application files that apps are distributing, right? So you can download those from the blockchain manager super easily and manage those as well. It really provides such an easy interface. I love it.
Yeah, exactly. And we see like for development purposes, it's mostly needed to set up a private domain. But then once the application has been proven out and you're ready to go to DevNet, then we facilitate that with Catalyst as well. So here I briefly wanted to showcase an enterprise participant where we then focus a bit more on other functionality like pruning, which is needed during runtime if the data grows, or setting up backups. If you then need to, for example, clean your underlying infrastructure and then restore it. So all of these things, we really want to focus on how do we allow a user to focus on the business value, and again, bringing that utility to the network and reducing the risks and the time consuming efforts on bringing that to life. So this is how easy it is to create an own domain, create a participant that we have here, the Buildcast participant with our DAR, our network app being deployed. If you then want to deploy a validator, it's a very similar process. So before doing that, briefly going over the other things, Catalyst is around to do remote administration for existing domains and participants as well. But for a validator node, there's a bit more setup or configurations that you need to fill in. So we need to provide all the necessary fields. So here we can say this is the Buildcast validator. And then the onboarding secret, and quickly copy paste. So the onboarding secret is provided by a super validator on the network. Then we give in password. So all of this we automate with the help of Catalyst. So you're given the configurations once, Catalyst will take it from there and then really ensure that everything is being deployed in a seamless manner. So then here we insert all the other information and fields that are needed. You can go as custom as you want. We'll say here as identifier, call it the Buildcast ID. Hit continue, do all the necessary resource configuration. We can do certain unique environment variables if that's required as well. You can see here an overview of everything. You hit confirm, and then all the necessary components of a validator node will start being deployed. Now, while this is up and running, we'll go into one that we have created previously. So as you can see here, and as Ben, as you explained, validator node consists of a participant that is joined, in this case, to the domain called the global synchronizer, which is a decentralized domain run by the different super validators on the network. And then the other applications are also installed with the help of that. So we're going to hear that specific participant node. You can see here, and this will take a little bit of time to load, but we can see here that there's currently already 14,000 parties on DevNet, and they're actively working on different applications and testing it out. But then it provides, again, the same interface as if you would deploy a participant on a local domain. So the global synchronizer really has to be seen as a decentralized domain that allows all of that utility that has been built over the past years to now really start collaborating and bringing those companies together to drive that utility further. And how do we accelerate and increase the value we can provide to our end consumers?
Fantastic. And so in terms of, running a validator and starting to receive the rewards through the foundation for providing that utility to the network, obviously having high uptime, stuff like that is really critical to that whole process, right? So
Well, because we're functioning on a decentralized network and we have the tokenomics in play, it's of high importance that you have that resiliency in place to always be connected to the different participants on the network. If you're providing a validator node or a super validator, that then really becomes critical to provide that service to the network. And hence also the focus of Catalyst and the value we can provide there is that operational resiliency, those uptime guarantees to give you that service.
Cool. It was a great demo. And what I love, it's something that is so operationally, blockchains, distributed systems are operationally complex generally, and you just make it quite easy just to get in there, to monitor it, to see how the operations are going, and just to spin up these different types of operations within Canton. As with the cloud, I guess, institutions want to outsource node operations in different ways. So how do you support the different requirements? We've seen people maybe have different requirements at the beginning of their journey, and then that changes over time. How are people currently using Catalyst at those different stages of the journey, and how some the thought process is there?
So you're absolutely right. Like in our industry, there are different requirements when it comes to on-premises or different cloud vendors. So something we deliberately did at the start when building Catalyst is to make sure that Catalyst can run with zero cloud vendor lock-in, meaning we can deploy this on premises or any cloud environment that supports Kubernetes on or OpenShift. And that allows us to also bring that flexibility when it comes to infrastructure management and validator node hosting, where some companies can run, thanks to Catalyst, the validator node within their own environment, even sometimes completely siloed off from IntellectEU, or we could also provide it as a service, provide more that managed service experience, run it on a dedicated account for you. So really focusing how do we provide that flexibility for those enterprises, and how do we make Catalyst as a tool that can neatly integrate with your existing requirements. And again, let's focus on the business value. Let's focus on bringing that utility to the network and accelerate the growth of the ecosystem.
Can you give us some examples maybe of, the kinds of institutions that are looking at, running a validator and what their requirements might be versus someone that is maybe more, limited in terms of their own private cloud requirements, things like that?
Yeah, exactly. I think regulation is also a big play there. For example, in Europe, we have DORA that is forcing the banks to take more ownership of the infrastructure. And that's indeed where we see, okay, the banks, they want to leverage their own data centers for that. And then they might have different requirements. And then it comes to firewalling things off, making sure not every third party has access to things. So that's where we see, specifically for those requirements that Catalyst, the value it can bring is having it deployed on their systems, already addressing their security requirements, providing that flexibility there. But there's other customers that say, hey, we want to quickly join the network. For us, we don't have those requirements on our side. So then it's more, okay, IntellectEU, we will host the infrastructure for you, run Catalyst and the validator for Node for that. And then later on, we could migrate. So we actually seen companies where they say, okay, we want to act on speed. Please run it for you, provide that managed service. And then when they go into production, they say, okay, please migrate back to our infrastructure as the requirements come in.
Yeah, I think it's been great. We obviously launched the genesis of the global synchronizer in mid 24, and in that time you've managed to really help us in supporting over 70 validators that are just coming online now, which has been a great help to really help to scale the network in these early phases. So thanks for all that support, and it's great to see you really supporting the ecosystem. Are you also actively involved in the foundation and what have you? So you can recommend firms to become validators. You can ask Linux and the GSF about that, right?
Yeah, exactly. You can reach out to the GSF. You can find us at on our website, catalyst.intellecteu.com, or reach out to myself, or I think to you, Ben, as well. But I think that we really see the growth in the Canton network as well. Largest banks of the world are building on it, are involved in it. So that's where we see that there's a great acceleration happening and evolution.
It's always great fun talking to you. I hope we're doing another one of these in 10 years' time, Jonathan, and we're reflecting on that scale and adoption. Really, really good to catch up with you again.
It's a wrap for this episode of the Canton Buildcast. Want to dive deeper? Check out the links below to learn more, connect to apt, or bring your assets and use cases to Canton. And don't forget to hit subscribe to stay on top of the latest apps and opportunities shaping institutional grade on-chain finance. Bye for now.